Anyway, here to tell a story tonight. My story takes us back to a time when things were a lot simpler. You know, like when we lived with like a secure naivety about the world. And of course, I am talking about the days before, you know, Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and Tumblr and TikTok. And it was also the days before online dating. I don't know about you guys, but I fondly remember the days before, you know, eHarmony and Tinder Surprise. And RSPCA. Go for it, Abby. Maybe not that loud. It was the days when we watched TV on a TV. Yeah? And we watched TV on TV. And email was becoming a really important part of our daily lives. Yeah? And it's what I like to call the days of dial-up. Anyway, hopefully you get that. We tried, Matt, we tried. We tried. No, that's good, Abby, don't worry about it. Turn it off, though, for fuck's sake. So anyway, it's what I fondly call, the days of dial-up. And this story centres around the phenomenon of email, and specifically like the early days of what's now known as catfishing. Alright, so this story, it goes back to me. I was in my early to mid-20s, okay, and everything was going pretty well. I had a good job, I had a great girlfriend, I'd paid off like all the major debts, like my university debts and stuff. I'd just finished paying them off, and I'd even just bought my first new car. Alright, so everything seemed to be going along well. So what I did is I quit my job, I broke up with my girlfriend, I packed up my life and I went backpacking. Yeah, good life choice that one, let me tell you. So anyway, and when I was backpacking, I was in Scotland at one point, and if you've ever been to Scotland, it's a beautiful place. It really is. I walked right across the country. Actually, the fault line, there's a big geographical crack through the country where the locks are. Anyway, I think that's why the Scots are a bit crazy. But I can't go into too much detail about that just now. I'm telling another story. So, but if you ever get a chance here, go to Scotland. It's beautiful. So I was in Scotland, all right, and I was checking my emails. Now, I should say at this point, back in the days of dial-up, all right, when you needed to check your email, you had to either go to like an internet cafe or a library or like a friend with a connection so you could get on to check your emails. Yeah, so I was in this library of this tiny Scottish town, Drumnadrochit it's called, and I was in there and I was checking my emails, and I got this email from a fella called Dr. Sani Ahmed, okay? And Sani, he sent me this hello email, and he basically said he was a retired Nigerian bank official. Yeah. And he had just recently retired with the Prince's recognition, no less, for his services to the financial sector. All right. And because Sani had a colleague who had done some business with me in the past, he had identified me as someone he could trust. Okay? And so obviously you guys at this point, you understand this is a hoax email. And but this was like early days. I think they call it the Nigerian 419 now, all right? But this was real early days of the Nigerian 419. And this was either, I don't know if it was the very first email I got about this, but it was like really early days. So, and another thing is, I don't know if they'd done any research on me or if they'd just gotten lucky, because a year beforehand I was working in an export business, and if any of you guys know about exporting stuff around the world, there's a thing called a letter of credit, and that's when the banks hold the money on behalf of both parties, etc. So basically it wasn't out of the realm of possibility that my name had popped up on some foreign bank. Okay, so I probably think they just got lucky though. So I sort of had to think about this, and that, you know, So yeah, basically at that point I just said to him, oh well, why not? So I said to Sani, oh yeah, I'd be happy to hear his proposal. Okay, so Sani writes back to me, and he basically told me that over his career he had embezzled $50 million US, all right, but he couldn't access it in Nigeria, and because he knew he could trust me, what he wanted me to do was he was going to send it as cash to a foreign place, like an airport or something, to a customs, and I could go and pick it up physically. And if I did that, I would receive $5 million US. Okay, now 99% of me knew this was all bullshit. Okay, but 1%, 1% of me was like, what if? What if? You know, and 1% of what if is an intrepid thing, is a very powerful thing to an intrepid young man like me. So I wrote back to Sonny and said I was in. Yep. And then the logistics started. Okay, let me tell you, it was a clusterfuck. Like, they just sent me all these emails, and they're like, Sonny's like, okay, he wants me to go to Cairo to pick it up. And I said, no, London will do. And then he goes, oh, he'll send it to Barcelona. And I said, no, London's good. And then he said, oh, he'd send it to Paris. And I said, no, London works. And then he tried a bunch of other places, Berlin, Milan, Frankfurt, and that. And this went on for months. Now remember, as I said earlier, in the days of dial-up, you had to go in and check emails. And so I was checking my emails really sporadically. You know, sometimes it'd be 2 days, 4 days, a week between checking them. And I was still up in Scotland. And so he'd been asking me for my phone number. And one day, I don't know, I must have had a brain fart, I just gave him my phone number. And so then he started calling. He rang, he was like a fucking stalker. He just kept ringing and ringing. And so on the odd occasion that I actually answered, he'd be like really urgent. He'd be like, Mr. Muldoon, we must act immediately, you know, or the money will be gone. And he sort of really put the urgency on me. And I was like, oh, well, mate, I'm not sure. So we just did this rigmarole over and over. And then one day I left on a bus from Inverness, which is right up in the north of Scotland. And I got on the bus pretty hammered because I went from like a farewell party for me, and they put me on a bus. And so I'm on the bus feeling great, but then, as you know, it was like a 14-hour bus ride to London. So I started feeling pretty good at the start, and I was feeling pretty ordinary as it went along, as the hangover kicked in. And about halfway in the trip, my phone rings. It was just as we're coming into Birmingham, actually, if you've ever been there. It's a beautiful city. Yeah, someone's been there. So, anyway, and that's where Sani rang me again. And he's really urgent and sort of angry and really pressuring me. Mr. Muldoon, we must act immediately. You know, it will be gone. It will be all your fault. We must do something now. And I sort of, because I was feeling so ordinary, I just said, look, mate, you know, whatever. Like, we both know it's bullshit. Don't hassle me. And I hung up. And I thought that would be it, to be honest. I thought, oh, that bloke will realise. And he left me alone for a little while. And then I got to London, and I'm sort of regretting my life choices then, because I'm looking for a hostel with a hangover in the middle of the night and that sort of thing. So anyway, I found one, and then I was there for a few days. Actually, I met a lady from South Africa, and we hung out. We had this 5-day romantic bliss. But she was just in London. She'd finished her backpacking for a year or two, and we just met her, and she was basically on her way back to South Africa to go get on with her life. So we had this 5 days of bliss, and then she left, and so I was sitting there in this shitty hostel feeling real sad, like I had the blues, and then my phone rings, and it's my old mate Sani again. Right? And I'm feeling real bad, and he rings, and he's like, pressuring me again. You've got to give it to him for persistence. He didn't really have much flexibility in his style, but it's fucking persistent. So he's just at me again. Mr. Muldoon, we must do something now. We must do it now. It'll be all your fault. All the money I've worked for over the years, you know, he's making all his problem mine. And I sort of sat there and I was listening to him, and I said, well, so what, you can't send it to London then? And he goes, no, I can't send, you know, because of all these reasons. He had a bunch of excuses, you know. And so I just said, and he's like, talking, you know, just continuously, and I just said, well, send it to Amsterdam. and there was this pause on the phone, like he just stopped. And then he goes, "Oh, I will get back to you." And he hung up. And within like 20 minutes, I get a text from him. And he's like, "Yep, we can send it to Amsterdam." He sent it. I was pretty confident, sent 50 million on a phone call. But anyway, he sent it, and he said his assistant would get in touch with me. And within a few minutes, my phone rang again with a Dutch number, because I was smart enough to learn a few foreign international codes, and this one was coming in on a different one. And this was now Mr. Michael Ramidi. And Michael was probably made Sani look relaxed. He was real pushy, eh? And so he's on the phone to me, and we must meet, blah, blah, blah. And I just said, "Okay, mate, rightio, well, I'll get a ticket today. I'll see you there tomorrow." Like, and he's like, "Ooh, okay." So off I went that day. I bought a ticket to Amsterdam, and I came back to the hostel, and I was just going to stay in the hostel one more night and then leave the next day. And now the ticket I got was for late in the evening the next day. Like, I think it left about 5 o'clock or something, so I had to hang out all day. But if you've ever stayed in hostels, they kick you out at fucking 10 o'clock in the morning. So and then that night, I've come back from getting my ticket. I go into the hostel, and there was this group of guys there, and they just plied me full of piss, because they were real happy, because somewhere in that 5 or 6 days beforehand, we're having a conversation, and I've just said to them, because they were living in this hostel, and they were from Australia, they've been working there a few years, and they didn't know about this tax loophole that if you're not a resident, you can just get all your tax back. So they've been paying tax for 3 years, and they're about to leave, so they thought I was great, because I said, "Oh, if you just send this form and you'll get all your money back that you've paid tax for the last 3 years." So they've all got that back. They're like, "Fucking yes." So I walked in, they're like, "Oh, that's the guy." So they plied me full of piss for that night, which was unexpected, but I went along with it because I'm a friendly guy. And so then the next morning, mate, of course, the hostel's booting me out. So I couldn't lie around and have a hangover or anything like that. So I was feeling horrible all day the next day, because I was pretty full on, pretty sideways the night before. So, and then that day, actually, just as a point of interest, more than anything, is I got a phone call from Australia, which was pretty uncommon, because this is before Skype and stuff, really. This is when international phone call days. And it was a mate of mine, and he was just giving me a quick ring to tell me he's getting married and would I be his best man. So I said, "Oh yeah, no worries." We had a really quick chat, but he then said, "Oh, so what are you up to?" And just off a whim, I just said, "Oh, I'm just about to go and get on a plane to go and pick up $50 million. And he just laughed like you guys. He just thought I was just being silly, like I often am. And besides that, no one in the world knew where I was going and who I was meeting. So off I went. I went out to, what's the airport in London, the big one? Heathrow. Went out to Heathrow, got on the plane, flew over to Schiphol. Now, part of the plan was to meet Michael at the airport, Mr. Ramidi, at the airport. And what I was going to do is when I got there, I'd just give him a ring or send him a text. And I'd sent him, because I'm really security conscious, I'd sent him my flight details. So he knew when I was coming in, what gate, the whole bit. So we get there, I pulled my phone out, but I was on some, backpacking, fucking prepaid shitty plan, so it didn't work. So then I went up to the public phones, which were still around back then. Some of you guys mightn't remember them, but I tried that, but that was all in Dutch, and I was too hungover to work that out. So I just walked around, and I had this heavy as fuck backpack, I remember that. And I thought I'll just wander around Schiphol Airport and see who I reckon this guy might be. And I picked out 3 guys. The first guy I picked out was at a bar, really close to the gate that I was coming in on. And he was a massive man, ebony coloured man. He was like such a big man, and he had this beautiful bone suit on with a skivvy, and he's sitting at the bar with a cognac in front of him, and I'm like, oh, that could be him, that might be one of the guys. And I wandered around a bit later, and I saw another guy wandering around about my height with a tan jacket, and he was really shifty looking. Thought, oh, that might be him. And then I saw a third guy with like a Matrix length black leather coat, and he was as ebony as the first guy, but he wasn't quite as tall, but he was really thick set, like a really strong looking man. But he had a look in his eye that was frightening. Like I looked at him and went, "Oh, this guy's done some bad things." So anyway, that was my 3 picks. So then I'm waiting around, wandering around. I get to the gate, I sort of hang around it, and my phone rings. It actually rings in, and it was Mr. Remedi ringing me. And then there was kind of this, I'm getting around thinking I'm some sort of fucking secret spy, in my head. And so I'm there walking around, I'm on the phone, how you going? And he's like, where are you, Mr. Maldon, where are you? And I said, I'm at the gate. And he's like, so am I at the gate. He's like, put your hand up. And I'd seen him because the big guy, and he stood out, he was such a massive man. And he was standing up on the phone, the guy in the bone suit that was at the bar nearby, and he's standing near the gate. And I said, no, need to, mate, just turn around. And so that guy turned around. So I picked him out. It was my first pick. So by that point, that's reinforced in my mind that I should be fucking 007. I picked the guy, first pick, and that's him, So I'm there. And also in this weird, because we both knew it was bullshit, but we're both going along with it. It was like this, I don't know even how to explain it to this day, but this kind of outdoing each other. And the fact that he turned around and I'm standing there going, g'day mate, how you going? I was sort of on top of you know what I mean? So then he pulls me into this airport bar, and he made heaps of mistakes. I haven't got time to go into them all now, but we sat there for probably an hour, all right? And the plan was that I would take my passport and €7,000, which I just found out about, as he told me in this plan, up to the customs desk, give them that, and they would give me this package of $50 million. All right? So he's telling me this, and I've gone, yeah, no worries, that sounds good. Just one point I'm not too comfortable with. This is the first I've heard about the €7,000. He's like, oh, it's no trouble, you'll get it straight back in. And this went on for quite a while, and I'd started off, I hadn't said I had €7,000 to start with. But after a while, I don't know, I wasn't even drinking because I was too hungover, but and I'm too tight to pay for a beer in the airport bar at that time. So I just, at some point I just decided to tell him I did have €7,000, and that amped things up. He got really, really full on. And so we're sitting there, and so he's like, you must do it now. And I said, well, I can't get it in the airport. No one told me. How was I supposed to bring it? So then we were like, rightio, that's all right. We'll go into town. And it was pretty late. It was pretty late at this point. It must have been 9 or 10 o'clock at night in Holland, because you lose an hour when you go that way. So it would have been, probably 10 o'clock, or even a bit later actually, 10 or 11 o'clock. And so, righto, the plan is we'll go into town, find somewhere to stay. Now remember this, I probably should have pointed this out as well. Mr. Remedi, he's Sani Ahmed's assistant who'd come from Nigeria to do this as well. And so in my mind, in part of the story, he's just landed here today sometime or the night before. And so we're driving in, we're driving around, and I said, oh mate, I'll just stay in the same hotel as you. Well, they didn't like that idea. Didn't like that idea at all. No, they hadn't thought of that question at all. But before I got into the car, so then he's rung his driver, all right, from the bar, and he said to me, you must not speak to my driver. Only I can speak to the driver. Okay, and I'm like, right. So he rings his driver, and we started out. I said, well, we can make a move towards it. And the next thing, his driver's coming towards us, and I'm walking along with him. He's such a massive man with a massive presence, like next to me. And then this other guy walking towards him. Who would it be? It's the dude in the Matrix cut. And he's walking towards us, and I'm like, holy shit, this dude's involved. Honestly, that dwarfed me out. I'm like, oh geez, I'm like thinking maybe I shouldn't get in this car in my head. But I got there, and then this guy turns up, they had a chat. He didn't even, it was the way he treated me as if I was supposed to do this deal. It was just I was so irrelevant to this. He was a really hard, I don't know how to explain it, but he's scary, this fella in the Matrix cut. But he wasn't quite as big, but yeah. Anyway, off I went, got in, we go to the car. So who's under the story, he's just the driver. So I get to the car, and besides my passport and a bit of cash, everything else I had was in this fucking 32-kilogram backpack I'd been lugging around. All right? And I sort of thought, and he's opened the boot, and I'm taking this pack off, and I'm like, I've never been to this town ever. If things go sideways, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. And back in these days, there was a thing called Lonely Planet. It was a book. And I had a version of it that was called Europe on a Shoestring. It just had a bit about all the... And I had it just in this side pocket of my backpack, so I've chucked my pack in the boot and just grabbed this Lonely Planet book. And they're looking at me, and in my mind, I just thought, if I have to run away, basically, if I get taken wherever the fuck and have to run away, I'll be able to have this book to sort of work out where I am. This is my thinking at the time, anyway. That'll help me navigate this emergency. Anyway, we might have been thick enough to stop a bullet too, I don't know. But anyway, so I'm sitting in this car with this Lonely Planet book in my hand. We're driving along, and it was the weirdest trip in. It's probably a good half-hour drive from Schiphol into Amsterdam. So we're driving along, and he told me not to talk to this other guy. I'm sitting in the back, and I couldn't help it. I'm nervous somehow. He's playing some music, and I just go, "Oh, who's this?" They're like, "What?" So who's on the radio? Who's this? And this the hard bloke. He only said one word all night, like the scary guy, and he just goes, "Culture." And it just said Shivers. That's the name of a band. I was like, fuck. It's just so scary. So anyway, we get in, and same words, I said, we're driving around. I said, I'll stay with you. And he's like, oh, no, we can't do that. I'm staying somewhere else. Yeah, he didn't have a story for that. But so I was like, yeah, whatever. So we found somewhere right in Amsterdam, right in the guts, way above my daily fucking backpacking budget, let me tell you. So off we go, and he came in. So the guy that's driving parks the car out front. Us two get out. Oh mate gets my pack out of the back. We go into the little concierge, and it must have been getting, as I said, around 11 o'clock by this time. And so we go in, and there's a stereotypically Dutch guy at the counter. Oh, hey mate, how are you? And very friendly and all that. So we're there, and we check in. He gives me a room, and then up we go, and then old mate carries my bag, and up we go to the room. And the next thing I know, I'm in my hotel room with him. The only person in the world besides the guy down in the car who's even scarier that knows where I am in the world at this point in time. So we're sitting in the hotel room. As I said to you, the hangover was decent, so I'm feeling pretty sick still. And I'm like, now I've paid €150 for a room when my daily budget was 10 or something like that. So I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to eat all the biscuits and have all the coffee straight away, like to say I'm boiling the kettle, doing all that sort of stuff. And he's wanting to talk about what we're going to do tomorrow, like full on. So we sat there, and I said, you want a drink? And I'm kicking my shoes off and that, trying to get comfortable. And he's sitting there, and he sat on the chair, and then we're talking this over and over and over. It's just like going around in circles, and I'm picking him apart, and then he'd get angry. But the few things he kept saying is he's a man of God, I could trust him. A few times he said, I don't even drink, and I felt like saying, well, what do you have a cognac at the fucking airport for? But I didn't even say that. I'm like, man, you're not very good at this shit. That's all. So anyway, then this went on for a while, and then at one point I'm like, well, I might have €7,000, but I don't know why I should be the guy that takes it up. And we were sitting opposite each other. I'm on the bed and he's on his chair. And I always remember because it's the first time I got close to being violent. And I'm sitting there, I had no shoes on, and he had these massive feet with these boots on that would have been like this long. And he started hitting me on the inside knee because we're sitting like real close. He's like, you must do it, you must do it, we must. And he's really hitting like this, and I'm like, oh shit, this is about to kick off. I didn't see this coming. The first thought I had was I just pulled my sneakers back on, because I was like, we have to tangle, I didn't want him, these big boots stomping all over my bare feet. So anyway, so I did that, but it didn't get to that point. We managed it. At one point I was back on the phone to Sani Ahmed because I was doing a wee, and he brought the phone into the toilet to give it to me. That was fucking pretty scary. So it's weird. So then we're doing that, and then it's finally I wore him down. It was just like probably a couple of hours. It would have been 1 o'clock in the morning though, and we'd made the agreement. Okay, in the morning, well, I hadn't committed to the €7,000, but I said, what about we go halves in it? And I reckon he thought, oh, well, maybe 3,500 is good enough from this dude. So he's like, oh yeah, maybe we'll do that, but we'll talk about it more tomorrow, and we'd go and get the money. So the plan was, he was going to leave tonight, finally, and they'd come back in the morning, and we'd go and get the money, and then go out to the airport and pick up the 50 million, and we'd all live happily ever after. So as he was leaving, because he's still saying how he's a man of God, and he had a skivvy on, he pulled this cross out. He's showing it to me, and he was sort of leaving, I'm looking at this cross, and he's going, you can trust me, Mr. Malden, you must be able to know you can trust me, I'm a man of God, and over and over. And what I did then is I'd seen this cross, and I said, well, you'll know what this is. And we're walking towards the door, and where we just put my pack down, there was this tiny pendant on one of the straps of my backpack, and it was given to me. It's just of a dove, and if any of you are Christian or Catholic, my mother would give it to me because there's a protection or some shit, I don't know. So I'd put it on the strap of my backpack, and it was this tiny dove, and so he's sort of looking, but because he's so tall, and he probably didn't know what it was, so I think he might have been stretching the truth, saying he's a man of God, but he bent down to have a look, right? So he bends down, and as he bends down though, his jacket on his suit rode up, and that's when I saw his gun. Yeah, and that's when I had the okay, now I'm frightened moment. Yeah, and honestly, my heart was just going fucking bomb, like full on. And, you know, the cold sweats, all that, just massive. Surge of adrenaline that would bring an elephant back to life, sort of thing, like. And but I had to play it cool because he's almost out the door. So I'm there, and luckily he didn't see the look on me, he's walking out there. I'm saying, yeah, no worries, I'll catch you tomorrow, everything. And I'm just basically closing the door behind him. He's on the other side, still talking to me, and while I'm locking it up. And I'm like, yeah, no worries, talk to you tomorrow, yeah, no dramas. Anyway, so then he left, and I took a moment, did take a moment to gather myself because I was freaked out. And because up to that point, I never felt like it was out of control. I don't know. This might be something that goes on. Plenty of people have disagreed with me, but it didn't feel like it was out of control. And even to the point where I'm putting shoes back on, I'm like, oh, this ain't going to be good, but it wasn't out of control. But when I saw it going, I'm like, whoa, this is way beyond me. So then I took a moment, and then after I'd gotten over the initial fear, I guess, and surge of adrenaline, then the paranoia set in. And let me tell you, I didn't need to go to a coffee shop in Amsterdam to fucking freak out. It was full on. So I just made the decision, I'll have to just go home tomorrow. Like, this is way beyond me. So but then I'm like, part of me is like, oh, it's the first time I've ever been to this city. I can't just fucking go to a hotel room and leave again. So, and it's like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So I'll have a look around tonight. So off I go downstairs, and the little Dutch guy at the counter, he's like, oh, hello. And I'm like, yeah, you're very pep for this time of night. He wants to talk to me. He ushers me over, and he says, oh, how are you? And I said, yeah, I'm a bit tired, but, I'm just going to have a look around because I'm going to leave tomorrow. And he said, oh, are you? And then he basically goes, oh, did you know the people you came in with? And I'm like, oh, maybe. Why is that? And he goes, oh, he just wanted to tell me. He didn't know me. He just goes, I just wanted to let you know, there's some very dangerous people in Amsterdam. And you must be very careful like this. And, he's a really nice fellow. And I'm just like, oh, yeah, no worries. Yep, no, it's all good, mate. But it just freaked me out even more. So I actually had a look around Amsterdam, but in my head, everyone was involved with this fucking setup. Every person I saw. And then this poor woman must have been begging or something. And I've been back, I lived in Holland years later, even for a little while. But at this point, late at night, probably shouldn't have been walking around. I always remember I scared myself because a guy, or I thought it was a lady, I can't remember, but they tugged on my jacket from behind to get me attention, and I turned around and put him up against this wall like that and went, whoa, I'm way too wound up to be wandering around here. I nearly let go, and I was, righto. So I went, and they were like, oh, I just want some money, they're up. So I went back to the hotel room and tried to get some sleep. And then at 7 o'clock in the morning, the phone in my room rings. And there's obviously only 2 people in the whole world that know I'm there, and that's the 2 guys that dropped me off. So I didn't answer it, I'll be honest, I was too frightened to answer it. And it rang about every 15 or 20 minutes till I left. And I did have some breakfast because I freaked some Italian guys out at breakfast and tried to hang out with them. And they were real friendly, but they were kind of, why do you want to hang out with us so much? I just want a friend, I think. But so basically I tried to have a little look in the morning, but I basically went from the hotel room pretty early to the airport, to the train station. At the train station, a Dutch lady gave me a flower. I was like, I'm moving, I don't know how, that was just weird, but to the airport, and I got the next plane back to London, and that's when I started to feel safe, finally. And so, like when you tell a yarn or a joke or something, you try and finish it off with like a whimsical insight or something amusing, but I haven't really done that with this. My favourite bit of this whole story though comes like a couple of years later, and it was when I was back in Australia and I was working as export manager with this agribusiness. And because of my role as export manager, heaps of spam and emails would be sent to that address, and the IT department obviously read all the emails and they filter out a heap of them. And one day I'm going to this meeting and the IT manager let slip that he thought I was out of the country for work. And I'm like, oh yeah, why do you think that? You've been reading my emails. And he admitted to it, and he was saying how he loved reading my emails because they were so entertaining. But he honestly couldn't tell when I was talking to a real customer or when I was just winding people up. And so and then I said to him, I said, well mate, I'll give you a tip, is when the email says to the other person to meet me in some random airport around the world, that's usually me bullshitting people. And he was like, really? Yeah, because I told him this yarn, he really was like, holy shit. And I said, yeah, so I'm telling people, all these scammers around the world to meet me, and so meet me in these airports. And so if there's anything to take home from this yarn is, I think I would say to people to respond to your spam emails and tell people to meet you in hotels around the room and just never show up.